I needed to get away. My roommate had been acting strange, watching me sleep, standing in the doorway at odd hours, barely speaking when confronted. I couldn't take it anymore, so I packed a bag, got into my truck, and drove deep into the woods to my family's old cabin. It was the perfect escape, isolated, quiet, and safe. I arrived in the dead of night, navigating the winding back roads with ease. I'd helped build the cabin with my family, so I knew the way like the back of my hand. The moment I stepped inside, I felt a sense of relief. I started a fire, warmed myself, and prepared for a peaceful 3-day weekend alone. The first night passed without incident, but the next morning, I woke to the sound of crunching leaves outside the cabin. I froze, listening. It was probably just an animal. Still groggy, I made my way to the window and peeked outside, but saw nothing. The woods were still. I shrugged it off and went about my morning, stoking the fire, brewing coffee, and making breakfast. The day was largely uneventful. I chopped firewood, read my book, and let the quiet of nature settle my nerves. But then, in the afternoon, something unnerved me. I went to retrieve my ladder from beneath the cabin. The crawl space of the cabin was enclosed except for a small latched door where we stored tools and supplies. As I approached, I noticed the leaves had been disturbed and the door was unlatched. I hesitated. I thought back to the crunching leaves from earlier, wondering if someone was here. My mind fought between logic and paranoia. Maybe my parents had been here before me. Maybe the wind had shifted things around. I swallowed my unease and opened the door, shining a flashlight inside. The space was dark, cluttered with tools, offcuts of lumber, and a crumpled tarp. Everything seemed normal, nothing obviously out of place. I took the ladder and shut the door tight, this time making sure it was latched. As I worked on the roof, clearing it of leaves, I heard a sound from beneath the cabin. Deep, muffled thuds. Something was under there. I climbed down, grabbed my flashlight again, and unlatched the crawlspace door. My light cut through the darkness. The tools, the tarp, the lumber. Nothing had changed. No signs of an animal, and no movement. But something had been under there. I locked the door and told myself I'd check with my parents about a live trap in the morning. It was getting late and I was eager to settle in for the night. After dinner, I sat by the window, eating, watching the sun dip behind the trees. That's when I saw it. A shadow. It moved quickly from the edge of the cabin into the trees. A human-shaped shadow. My stomach dropped. Who the hell was out here? No one should know I was here. I locked every door and window. The cabin didn't have curtains. Why would it? We were miles away from civilization. But now, that openness made my skin crawl. I turned off the lights and climbed into bed, pulling the axe I'd brought inside closer to me. At some point, I drifted off. Then, I awoke to breathing. Deep, slow, measured. At first, I thought it was the wind. But no, this was rhythmic and matched my own breathing. but it wasn't mine. The axe was in my hand before I even registered grabbing it. I sat up slowly, heart pounding, eyes scanning the dark cabin. I turned on the flashlight. The beam passed over the window, and for a brief second, I saw a face. Pale, expressionless, staring, and then it quickly ducked away. A heartbeat later, I heard the leaves crunch as it ran into the woods. My chest tightened. Someone was watching me. I bolted to the front door, flipped on the porch lights, and scanned the tree line. Nothing. Just the eerie stillness of the forest. I had to get out of here. What was supposed to be a relaxing trip was turning into something else. Even though it was the middle of the night, I started packing. I wasn't going to wait until morning, but when I went outside to load my truck, I noticed something was wrong. The truck sat lower on one side. I circled around and felt my stomach drop. The rear tire was flat. The valve stem had been cut clean off. A cold chill crawled up my spine. Then, the crunching leaves started again, closer this time. I ran to the door and slammed it shut, just as the footsteps turned to a full-on sprinting. Whatever was out there ran straight towards the porch. Then, silence. No movement, no breathing. I gripped the axe, every muscle in my body locked in terror. Then the pounding started. Fists slammed against the door. The walls, hard, rhythmic, deliberate. It could break the glass, but it didn't. It just pounded. Then it stopped. The footsteps retreated, crunching through the leaves, fading into the distance. I moved quickly, hanging blankets and sheets over the windows. It wouldn't stop them, but at least I wouldn't have to see them. And I thought, maybe if it didn't see me, it would give up and go away. I pressed my back against the wall, axe in hand, and waited. Minutes turned to hours, and finally the sun rose. I knew I couldn't stay another night, and my only option was to run. I took a deep breath, unbolted the door, and ran. Snow and ice crunched beneath my feet as I sprinted down the winding road, lungs burning from the cold air. I risked a glance over my shoulder. A figure stood on the porch, tall, still, watching. Its face was pale and its clothes were dark. I kept running. Another glance. It had moved. Now it stood at the start of the road. No sound, no footprints, just there. Panic surged through me again. I ran harder, legs screaming. Then, salvation as a car approached in the distance. I waved frantically. The driver slowed, cracking the window, hesitating as I breathlessly tried to explain. And while it was clear they didn't believe me, they let me in and offered to drive me to the police station, which I accepted. As we drove away, I turned back one last time. The figure stood at the intersection where the dirt road met the highway, watching and waiting. I didn't see the pale person on the way to the police station, and after I gave my statement, an officer offered to drive me back to the cabin and offered to call a company to have my tire replaced on my truck, both of which I took. Throughout the day, I never saw that person again, and once my truck was fixed, I left the cabin and never looked back. Thank you for listening to Audible Insomnia. If you've made it this far, please consider subscribing, commenting, or following. I enjoy creating this type of content, and your viewership means the world to me.